The unexpected encounter, the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum, buzzed with the sound of New York's elite as they gathered for the annual Children's Education Foundation auction. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks above marble, floors that reflected the shimmer of designer gowns and diamond jewelry. Servers glided between tables carrying champagne that cost more than most people earned in a week. Elena Rodriguez adjusted the sleeves of her navy blue dress, a treasured piece she had kept from her previous life. 52, she carried herself with quiet dignity, despite the circumstances that had led her to the streets 6 months ago. Her graying auburn hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her hazel eyes held a depth that spoke of both suffering and resilience. She clutched a small leather purse that contained her most precious possessions, including the invitation she had found discarded in a trash bin outside the museum. Elena had once been a respected social worker, dedicating her life to helping families in crisis, but when the non-profit organization she worked for collapsed due to financial scandal, she lost everything. Her savings vanished with unpaid wages, her apartment was foreclosed, and at her age, finding new employment proved impossible. The streets became her unwelcome home. But they never broke her spirit or her faith in human goodness. Tonight, she had cleaned up at a local shelter and used her last $5 for subway fare. The security guard at the entrance had barely glanced at her invitation before waving her through. She didn't belong here among these wealthy patrons, but something deep inside urged her to attend. At the far end of the ballroom, William Sterling sat alone at table 1, the most prestigious spot in the venue. 45, he was the founder and CEO of Sterling Technologies, a company that had revolutionized artificial intelligence and made him one of the wealthiest men in America. His black hair was perfectly styled, his jaw sharp and unforgiving, and his ice blue eyes surveyed the room with the calculating gaze of a predator. William wore his wealth like armor, his custom-tailored tuxedo fitting his athletic frame perfectly. But beneath the polished exterior lay a man who had systematically eliminated every trace of warmth from his life. After his wife's death in a car accident 7 years ago, he had retreated into a world of business deals and board meetings, finding solace only in the predictable nature of profit and loss. He attended charity events not out of compassion, but because his publicist insisted it was good for his image. He would write a check, sit through the evening without speaking to anyone, and leave as soon as socially acceptable. Human connection was a luxury he could no longer afford. As the auction began, Lena searched the crowded room for an empty seat. Her section seemed completely full, with guests packed shoulder to shoulder at every table, spotting what appeared to be several empty chairs at the prominent table near the stage. She made her way forward, apologizing softly to the elegantly dressed guests she passed. She had no idea that she was approaching the most feared table in the entire venue, where William Sterling sat in deliberate isolation. The surrounding guests had learned long ago to keep their distance from the man known throughout the business world as the Ice King. "Excuse me," Elena said politely, her voice carrying a slight Spanish accent that had softened over decades. "In New York, would it be all right if I sat here? Everywhere else seems to be taken." William looked up from his auction catalog, prepared to deliver one of his legendary cold dismissals that had made grown executives tremble. But when his eyes met Elena's, something unexpected happened. Her gaze held no fear, no recognition of his reputation, no calculation about what she might gain from the interaction. She was simply a woman, asking politely for a place to sit. "I suppose," he said after a long pause, his voice carrying less ice than usual. "Thank you so much," Elena replied, settling into the chair beside him with genuine gratitude. "I have to admit, I feel a bit out of place here. Everyone looks so sophisticated and important." The honesty in her statement caught William off guard. When was the last time someone had admitted vulnerability to him? Most people spent their conversations with him trying to impress or manipulate. "This is your first charity auction?" he found himself asking. Elena's face lit up with a smile that transformed her weathered features. "Oh, yes. And probably my last. I'm not exactly part of this world." She gestured around the opulent ballroom. "I believe in the cause. Education changed my life when I was young, and every child deserves that chance." Something in her tone made William study her more carefully. Beneath the simple dress and modest jewelry, he sensed a story of struggle and strength. showed the roughness of hard work, and there was a depth in her eyes that spoke of experiences far removed from the privileged lives surrounding them. "What brings you here tonight?" William asked, surprising himself with his genuine curiosity. Alina hesitated for a moment, then decided on honesty. "I found the invitation and thought it was a sign. I've been going through a difficult time lately, lost my job and my home, but I still believe in helping others, even when I can't help myself." The simple admission hit William like a physical blow. Here was someone who had lost everything, yet still thought of others. It was so foreign to his world of self-interest and calculated moves that he found himself speechless. "I'm sorry," Alina continued, misinterpreting his silence. "I shouldn't have shared that. You probably have enough problems of your own without hearing about mine." "No," William said quickly. "I mean, I don't have problems, not real ones." Alina studied his face with the perceptive gaze of someone who had spent years counseling people in crisis. "Everyone has problems. Sometimes the people who seem to have everything are carrying the heaviest burdens of all." Her words cut straight to the heart of his carefully constructed facade. Around them, the auction continued with spirited bidding, but William found himself completely absorbed in this unexpected conversation. For the first time in years, someone was seeing past his wealth and reputation to the man beneath. As Alina shared stories of her work with struggling families, her voice filled with passion and compassion, William felt something long dormant stirring within him. This homeless woman, who had every reason to be bitter and defeated, radiated a warmth that began to thaw the ice around his heart. Breaking through the ice haze, the evening progressed. Alina continued to speak with William as if he were simply another person seeking connection. She told him about the families she had helped during her years as a social worker, her voice filled with genuine care for people she would never see again. She spoke of children who had overcome impossible odds through education, parents who had learned to rebuild their lives after devastating setbacks. "You have a gift for seeing the best in people," William observed, his usual guarded tone softening despite himself. Alina smiled, her hazel eyes twinkling with warmth. "It's not a gift, it's a choice. I learned long ago that everyone is fighting battles we know nothing about. The angry teenager might be protecting younger siblings from an abusive parent. The distant coworker might be caring for a dying spouse. When you look for the story behind the behavior, you usually find someone who needs compassion, not judgment." William found himself leaning closer, drawn by her wisdom. What about someone who has hurt others? Someone who has become so focused on protecting themselves that they've forgotten how to care? The question was more personal than he intended, but Alina seemed to understand the deeper meaning behind his words. She turned to face him fully, studying his face with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "Think," she said gently, "that person is probably in the most pain of all. It takes tremendous energy to build walls around your heart. The question is, what happened to make those walls feel necessary?" William's breath caught in his throat. No one had asked him that question in 7 years. No one had cared enough to wonder about the source of his coldness. Round them, the glittering crowd continued their socializing. But he felt as if he and Alina were alone in their own private world. "My wife died," he said quietly, the words escaping before he could. "Stop them. Car accident. We had been married for 10 years, and I thought we would grow old together. After she was gone, I couldn't bear the thought of loving someone else and losing them too." Lena's expression filled with deep compassion. Without hesitation, she placed her weathered hand over his perfectly manicured one. The simple gesture sent warmth flooding through William's system in a way he hadn't experienced in years. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said, her voice carrying the weight of genuine understanding. "Grief can make us feel like love is too dangerous to risk again. But love isn't something we can control or protect ourselves from. It finds us when we least expect it, often in the most unlikely places." William stared down at their joined hands, amazed by how natural the contact felt. Elena's palm was rough from hardship, marked by the struggles she had endured. Yet her touch conveyed more comfort than all the expensive therapy sessions he had attended. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How do you stay open to connection when life has taken everything from you?" Elena was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "Because closing my heart wouldn't bring back what I've lost, but it would prevent me from receiving what I might still find. I lost my job, my home, my security, but I refuse to lose my capacity for hope. She paused, then continued with quiet strength. 6 months ago, I was sleeping in doorways and wondering how my life had gone so wrong. But tonight, I'm sitting beside someone who needed to remember that he's not alone in his pain. Maybe that's why I found that invitation. Maybe this conversation is exactly what we both needed. The profound simplicity of her words shattered something inside William. This woman, who had every reason to be bitter and closed off, was instead radiating a light that had somehow found its way past all his defenses. She wasn't trying to take anything from him or gain anything for herself. She was simply being present, offering the gift of genuine human connection. "You're remarkable," he said, his voice thick with emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Alina laughed softly, a sound like music in the formal atmosphere of the ballroom. "I'm just a woman who has learned that our greatest strength comes not from what we accumulate, but from what we're willing to share." Around them, other guests had begun to notice their intense conversation. Phones were being discreetly raised to capture the impossible sight of William Sterling, the notorious Ice King, engaged in what appeared to be a deeply personal discussion with a woman nobody recognized, but William was oblivious to their audience. For the first time since his wife's death, he was completely focused on another person's words, another person's presence. Elena's wisdom and warmth were melting barriers he had thought were permanent. "I've forgotten how to let people close," he admitted. "I've built my entire life around avoiding the risk of being hurt again." "And how has that worked for you?" Lena asked gently. William considered the question honestly. "I'm successful, wealthy, powerful. I have everything I thought I wanted, but are you happy?" The simple question hung between them like a challenge. William realized he couldn't remember the last time he had experienced genuine happiness, the kind that came from connection rather than achievement. "No," he whispered. "I'm not happy. I'm not anything, really. I just exist." Elena's eyes filled with tears at his honesty. "Existing isn't living, William. And you deserve to live fully, to love and be loved, to experience all the joy and messiness that comes with opening your heart to others." Something broke open inside William's chest, 7 years of suppressed grief and loneliness rushing to the surface. Elena seemed to sense his emotional turmoil, and without a word, she stood and moved her chair closer to his, creating a small bubble of intimacy in the crowded ballroom. "It's okay," she said softly. "It's okay to feel everything you've been holding back." For the first time since his wife's funeral, William allowed tears to fall. They came slowly at first, then with increasing intensity as years of pent-up emotion found release. Alina sat beside him, one hand on his shoulder, offering silent support without judgment or embarrassment. The surrounding guests watched in stunned amazement as one of the most powerful men in New York broke down in the arms of a homeless woman who had somehow accomplished what therapists, business associates, and well-meaning friends had failed to do. She had reminded him of his humanity. When the tears finally subsided, William looked at Alina with wonder. "I don't even know your last name," he said with a shaky laugh. "Rodriguez," she replied, smiling through her own tears. "Elena Rodriguez. And you're William Sterling? Though I didn't know that when I sat down. I just saw someone who looked like he needed a friend." As the auction concluded and guests began to leave, William made a decision that surprised even himself. Alina would. "You allow me to help you? I mean, really help you, not just write a check, but actually make a difference in your situation." Alina studied his face carefully. "I would be grateful for help, but only if it comes from your heart, not from guilt or obligation." "It does," William said with more certainty than he had felt about anything in years. "You've given me something invaluable tonight. You've reminded me that connection is worth the risk, that closing ourselves off from others only creates a different kind of death." As they exchanged contact information, both knew that this unexpected encounter had changed them fundamentally. Alina had found someone who could help her rebuild her life, but more importantly, she had found a friend who understood that true wealth came from the courage to remain vulnerable. William had discovered that the antidote to his loneliness wasn't more success or achievement, but the simple act of allowing another person to see and accept his authentic self, in trying to protect his heart, he had nearly lost his soul. Elena Rodriguez, a homeless woman with nothing to gain and everything to give, had saved him from a life of emotional exile. Sometimes the most profound transformations come from the most unexpected sources. And sometimes the greatest gifts are exchanged between strangers who dare to see each other's humanity.